So I figured kedai to speak about for a little bit because people have been talking about this. It's an important question to ask. Does Gog and Magog affect the Jewish people? It's a weird question. Meaning, is Klal Yisrael involved in this?
In the actual fight?
I mean, in the fight, does it affect us?
Sure it does.
It's a step for Mashiach.
100%.
So
but
then it has to involve us.
Okay.
Or affect us at least.
So the outcome will affect us.
Okay.
Does the Milchama affect us at all? This is an interesting
financially does. I'm sure it does economically and everything.
Maybe. So, I mean, when Chazal speak about this, who's involved? Who's involved in this Milchama? Meaning, is Klal Yisrael going to fight in this war? Like, who's...
It also depends on how you interpret a fight.
100%.
We just had a war with Iran, and
I don't think we had a war with Iran. I mean, I think maybe we had a war with Iran. I don't know if Iran had a war with us. I think they wanted to.
Iran won?
They wanted to have a war with us. I'm not convinced that they had one.
No, I agree.
I think today this was an excellent piece of news. I think Trump officially said this was an act of war, but not a war. What does that mean? Basically, I don't know.
He doesn't want to get in peace.
It's like with the nevuah. Any good nevuah is going to come true.
Right.
But if the nevuah has bad aspects, that can be changed.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
So
whatever we might call war, maybe this was the war.
Maybe. But meaning the shayla is like, does this affect us? Like, meaning, is this going to be painful? Well, also like that. Is this going to be painful? Is Gog and Magog going to be painful? And it's kedai to point out, and we've learned this before, and I want to just note this because it's very kedai to say it again and sit inside.
Wasn't it say that a lot of Jews were going to die in Gog and Magog?
Oh, so that's the shayla. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Like, does this affect us? Meaning, are people going to get hurt? Meaning, are Jews going to get hurt?
Nevuah is that any bad aspects of a nevuah don't necessarily have to come true. They can change.
That's for sure true. So the first thing to point out, we learned this a number of months ago, and I want to just chaz this point because it's very important to understand. Rav Kook wrote this during the First World War. It was later, many of these ideas were edited and turned into a chelik within the Sefer Oris, the first Sefer that Rav Kook published. The Oris HaMilchama, where Rav Kook writes as follows: when there is a great war in the world, it awakens the strength of Mashiach. Esa Zamir Higia. Esa Zamir, what does the word Zamir mean?
Shorish of Zemer.
So it means, Zemer, it also means pruning. Right?
It means what?
To prune. Esa Zamir Higia. There's if you take a look at any of the Svarim in the Beis Yankov, so he begins with Kimat every single parasha with a different mahalach in Mizmar Shir Liyam HaShabbos. Because the word Mizmar and the word Shir are fundamentally opposed to each other. Zemer, Lizmar, means to prune, and Shir is to remain. Meaning to something that is that's shire is that word to leave over. There is mizmar, is pruning, and shir, remaining. And Shabbos is both of them, because Shabbos is Zachar V'Shomer. And every parsha is connected to the parsha. But Rav Kook is Medagan is Esa Zamir Higia, that there is a time of pruning. Of course, that phrase comes from Shir Shirim, Esa Zamir Higia, the time of pruning.
I thought that it was Gog and Magog when the World War I took place.
No, well, maybe we'll get there. Not yet.
Okay.
So he says, Zamir Aritzim, it is the pruning of evil people. Arishayim Michadim Min Ha'olam Va'olam Mitbasem. The wicked people are taken out of the world, and the world is infused with a new smell. V'kol hator nishma b'aratzenu, and pasuk in Shirshim, kol hator nishma b'aratzenu. The heralding sound is going to be heard in our land. It says yechidim nisofim b'lo mishpat. There will be individuals that will be removed from the world below mishpat, without justice. And that's the Gemara in Chagiga, that there are times that even tzaddikim are taken out of the world. Which means that in this process there is this thing called misas tzaddikim that is mechaper, the death of righteous people, which creates a sense of kapara. It says, they rise up above at the root of all life, and the essence of their existence brings an overwhelming goodness to the world, for goodness and for blessing, to the entirety of existence. It says, and after the great wars, after these great wars, and he's obviously referring to the Great War. He was in London writing this during the First World War. So he says, after this, the world is renewed with a new ruach. And the feet of Mashiach are revealed more so. And as great as the war is in its amount and in its power, so too there must be an increase in the yearning for the feet of Mashiach in it. Meaning, whenever there is a great war, whenever there is a clash of ideas, ideologies, of superpowers, within that, there is an awakening of the footsteps of Mashiach. And we've spoken about this, just to be chazer on this, from shurim that we've spoken about in previous months and years. This is the Ramchal in Maimar HaChachma explaining the process of the korbanos of Chag HaSukkos, that there are 70 parim that are brought, and they go down day by day by day by day. And the Ramchal explains that it means that Klal Yisrael find themselves subsumed by one nation, and then there's a war, and nations fall, and Klal Yisrael bounces from place to place. And then another nation falls, and then we bounce to another place, and then another nation falls, and we bounce to another place. And those failures of those nations are those kochos of Elohim Achirim that are fighting with each other, that are bashing it out. Those are the focal points of what replaces the emes, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That those nations clash with each other, and those clashes awaken and reawaken a deeper truth, which is to reveal that that thing that nation thought was real, was their emes, is sheker. And that falls. And it crashes. And at that point in time, there is a greater hisgalus of Elokus, that there's the possibility, at least, of a greater awakening of the possibility of Mashiach. And that happens whenever there is a war. Certainly that Lav Dafka involves the Jewish people, but that Klal Yisrael is within. And that has been the vast majority of certainly Jewish history and Western history and European history. Is that there have been clashes that have gone on between different nations. And whenever Klal Yisrael is caught up amongst that, we end up affected by it negatively, always negatively.
Always.
It has never happened that Jews have been involved in a war, meaning have been in a nation that is warring, that it doesn't in some way, shape, manner, or form become the Jews' fault, or the Jews are to blame, or the Jews, it's bad for us. It's never going to be a good thing when nations are bashing it out with each other, and there's Jews there.
Starting now again, the left is saying the only reason we bombed Iran was because of the
Correct.
Jews, because we
Correct.
catered to Bibi, and who is Bibi?
100%. And the
happening
Jews are
right
dragging America.
But by the same
It's happening right
time,
now.
anytime something bad on a national scale happens, you see the achdus. We all start
100%.
improving, and that could also be part of what's bringing Mashiach to come closer, or us closer to that time, because we're finally doing what we should be doing all along.
That's 100% true. Although we should point out that for most of Jewish history, when bad things happened, so Jews simply were trying to survive. Meaning, it wasn't today, Baruch Hashem, it's a drive for Achdus, because something is very different in the last 77 years, and that is we have a place that Jews live that we can be biyachad. We can experience national Achdus, and we can try to at least achieve it. Meaning, try. For most of Jewish history, it was not about Achdus, it was about survival. If you can help a fellow Jew to survive, that's also survival. But it's correct to point out that what ends up happening when nations bash out against each other, what you end up finding is slowly but surely the gods of those nations fall. And the First World War, which Rav Kook is speaking about, saw the falling of many, many, many ideas and ideologies and gods of imperialism. Effectively, the end of the First World War was really the end of the Age of Empires. You had the Dark Ages went into the period of Enlightenment, and I mean, you had an Ottoman Empire, and you had a British Empire, and you had an American Empire. Let's be honest. You had an American Empire. You had a Russian Empire. You had major empires.
But then you had a new one. Germany tried to build an empire.
Correct. 100%. And the First World War was effectively the end of empires, meaning they all fell apart. That was the end of the idea of imperialism. Like it ended. And then it got split up into different nations. But those nations, interestingly and curiously, in many, many places, were no longer defined by nationalism or imperialism. They were defined, what'd you say?
Japan, possibly.
Yeah, they were trying. But they were defined more by isms, right? Meaning by ideologies. And nations then grouped themselves together by ideologies. You had the beginning of, really the beginning of the EU was after the First World War. The idea that like Europe is going to band together against the evils of whatever it might be. What'd you say?
Yes,
100%. And of course, Germany wasn't happy with that. And I mean, they weren't happy with that breakdown. They wanted their empire. So hence the Second World War. The isms, I mean, and it was also an ism, right? Meaning that was also an ism. And then that ended. That ended. And then the world broke down into two basic camps. Two basic camps at the end of the Second World War.
The Jews have started.
What'd you say?
Socialism and capitalism.
Right.
The Jews have started.
100%. And Jews are responsible for both, right? You have both. You have both of these things. Now, here's the interesting Nakuda. Is that war between capitalism and communism? When did it end? Or has it ended?
It hasn't.
No way, it's not over.
Changed. Cold War?
It's changed. It's changed significantly since the end of the Cold War. It's changed significantly. Meaning, it used to be that there was a war between capitalism and
Well,
communism.
because communism is adapted now. It's quasi.
It's quasi-capitalist.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
it was that war.
And
Cold War was really the challenge of it all, because
Yes.
communism was able to take all the riches and like, it had central power, but capitalism ended up winning out.
are you sure?
In the end, because it was able to outproduce it and it didn't run out of money.
So,
There was an external enemy to it. It's not external.
what do you mean?
It's more intertwined now. So Back then, you could identify communism with USSR.
Right.
As an entity. Now,
The lines are blurred.
I mean.
The lines are very blurred.
Democrat,
So it's
socialist,
its
and
own
America.
nation.
Well,
America,
China,
Right.
with this China, North Korea, there's other communist states.
I'm saying China is communist in its style of government and capitalist in its economy, right?
Right, it is a bit of a blend.
And to a very
Nations have
significant.
its own internal debate within it.
What'd you say?
Yeah.
The nations themselves have
Correct.
their own battle.
Meaning the battle between the United States and Russia is no longer communism versus capitalism. Interestingly, right?
And then the battle between capitalism and communism is no longer between the United States and Russia.
Correct.
It's like-
Meaning you find Republicans and Democrats are having a similar form of argument,
Mhm.
right? Meaning
And not just here.
throughout the world.
Yeah.
Throughout the world, there is a conversation that people are having. So, what is the war that is going on in the world today? What is the nakuda? Because you
Well,
understand
there's
that.
several fronts, right? You have the religious war.
Okay, so there's a religious war. What's the religious war?
Well, you have Islam.
Versus everyone else.
Christianity,
Okay.
Christianity versus Islam.
Is that who represents Christianity?
The like America, the Western world.
They represent Christianity.
In a lot of ways, they do.
Does Trump
Yeah.
think that he represents Christianity?
He thinks
Did he bomb Iran in the name of Christ?
No.
No, he's kind of sidestepped.
It's
a lot
still-
of that
it's
religious
still
stuff. He just
preservation.
says the things.
Yeah.
It's not the
He
religion.
says the generic God stuff.
It's the ideologies.
What is the ideology?
Or control,
Okay, control of what?
belief, or
People or individual rights.
So rights is a big piece of it. Rights is a big piece. What's the other piece
You
of it?
either follow the way we are, or you're not going to survive.
Okay,
The state versus individual.
what's the machlokes? So that's what we're going to try to figure out.
Well, Islam is submissive. You gotta submit to it, and then the all other nations are saying we're not submitting to it, and that's basically the fact.
Okay, so I want to point out, and this is kedai to understand, that while it's true that Islam is very strongly about submission, if you listen carefully to what the Ayatollah Makhshumai is talking about, when he says death to America, why does he say death to America? Why does he want America to die?
He wants the empire to die.
It's a
Is
great
it
question.
one nation under God? Is that what they?
No.
I don't think they represent that
What
anymore.
ideology does he
Right.
he completely reject as like ungodly
Right.
from his
It's the
perspective?
idea
Of what?
of America, of that.
The
of
freedom.
what
Freedom
his
is a lot of
perception
it.
of America.
Oh, so freedom, okay.
Freedom, the
Freedom of
Choice.
the attitude, the whole thing.
You understand? We talk about this a lot.
Well, it's
The
a
fact
freedom
that
of
we
not
could-
But
believing,
what does he
not
care? What does he
believing.
care about?
Yeah. Why does a lot of
You can't do
Because it
you
will
can't do
affect
what you
America.
want. You have to follow what.
Oh,
Well, other people see, and they want to.
okay.
Maybe
So-
the American Empire meddling in with the affairs of the Middle East and like
That's a
pumping up certain places.
that's a
Liberal argument, but still,
it's a side hustle. Meaning, but is that's what he really cares about?
It's definitely has something to do with it.
He doesn't want America to be involved. But
He doesn't-
but why death to
He
America?
doesn't want the influence of America to get through into his
Why?
people.
Why?
Because it
They
affects
lose
the.
control.
Well, that's how Soviet Union
So
felt.
they shut down.
We were sitting there, we were looking. Oh, look at this! The people are wearing jeans. We're not wearing jeans.
So
People are
let
covering their
me also
faces.
I want to also invite it because I want to understand the
He's wiping
man
out
here.
every cultural aspect that reminds you of what the origin of that particular country was. Even if you go back to Iran, culturally, the way people dress, they had, like every other country, people had a certain way they dress. And you can't do that anymore. They take that away. Everyone's on equal footing. And you're going to follow those rules or death to you.
So, but what is Let's say that Trump said, we're done. We're not, meaning isolationism, total isolation. We're not going to be involved in any wars anywhere. We're just going to America first. Would he still say death to America?
America's the world's policeman. One of
Is
the.
it like secular liberalism, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't think he believes that kind of existence can exist, regardless of whether or not it impacts.
I don't think no politician now will believe that unless they're mentally ill.
Maybe. I'm saying, but what does the man believe? What does he believe? Like, what is his
You're talking about
shita?
Trump?
No, Ayatollah. What is the shita of Iran?
What does the AI version of him believe?
So, like-
Actually, the question is.
No,
So let's learn a little
he's
bit.
dead and it's an
Let's
AI
learn a little
video.
bit. Because it's very clear that Iran is the representative. We learned this Maral Netzach Yisrael, that Islam is represented in the world today by Persia, meaning the championing of Islamic ideology, radical Islam, the most extreme version of Islam, the version of Islam that the West hates and that hates the West, that is championed by Shiite Islamism in Iran. That is the Malchus of Yishmael. The pasuk says, "V'hu yeh pere Adam," talking about Yishmael himself. "Hu yeh pere Adam, yadai b'kol v'yad kol boy, v'al panei kol echav yishkai." What does that mean? Literally, we'll get the official translation here. What does it mean? He's a pere Adam. What's the official? What does it mean? Hu yeh pere Adam. So this is curious. If you open up multiple translations, you're going to see lots of different shitas.
There's a wild man.
So okay, so yeah, they have here all of the various translations. This is Hu yeh pere Adam. He'll be a wild man. This is how the Quran translates it. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all of his brethren. That's the
That's the blessing for Ishmael.
that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says about Yishmael.
That's the root of the could be the root of the problem, because he's going to play second fiddle no matter what.
I heard.
Does that mean he's going to play second fiddle?
It sounds like it, certainly from the end of the pasuk.
Oh, so we'll get to the end of the pasuk.
So I heard a rabbi say once that like he'll have a hand in everyone, and that everyone will have a hand in them. Is like he's gonna have to be involved in trade with everyone because he has so much oil. Basically, it's like the way that came to.
So let's see. Let's see what the Rishonim say about this. The Mitzuda translates this as he will be a wild, uncivilized man, rebelling against people. His hand will be against everyone. He will need everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, meaning everybody will need him. Yeah, and in the presence of his brothers, he will dwell. Rashi, the Rashi Chumash translates that he will be a man of the wilderness.
Yeah, but that wasn't always the truth, right? The oil just, I mean, if you look at
Yeah.
it, just in this, 20th century?
Yeah.
But they were
So-
also very big in trade for many, many years. I mean, the Fertile Crescent and everything that went on along there.
So let's see the Ramban. The Ramban writes as follows. Quotes Rashi. Lashon Rashi. Oyev midbaros latzut chayas. He loves being out in the wilderness to hunt animals.
Sounds
K'moshe,
like Esav.
right? Very similar to Esav. Says K'moshe kasav v'yeshiv midbar v'hira v'kashas. He's going to be in the midbar. He's going to be in the desert, and he's going to be he's going to be an archer. I pointed out a number of months ago, right? Meaning that the koich of Yishmael is not going to be hand-to-hand combat. It's going to be the missiles, right? He's going to shoot arrows. Yad Bakol means listim. That Yad Bakol is that he's a thief. Yad Kol Boy Hakol Soim Soim Isgarim. And Yad Kol Boy, everybody is going to have a hand in him. Meaning everybody's going to hate him, and it's going to be angry with him. That's Rashi. Says the Ramban, "V'anochem ki pera adam samach, sheyeh ish pera limud midbar, Yetze b'pa'alai mishachar l'teref v'yitref hakol v'hakol yitrefu. So he says, Pera Adam is an interesting phrase. Usually, you would say that Adam Pera, meaning you have Adam Gadol, Adam Katan.
Yeah.
So what does Pera Adam mean? It's the other way around.
What does Kara mean?
Pera means wild. So the Ramban says it means that he is going to be a Pera Adam that is his definition. It's not a person that happens to be. Is a new entity of an individual called a
First
Pera.
and then he's an
Correct. I mean, he's a wild person. That's his mahus. That is his existence. Means that he's going to be. It says he's going to be attacking people, and other people are going to be attacking him. It says Va'inya. What exactly is this talking about? Says the Ramban. Va'inya al Zar'ai. This is not talking about Yishmael himself. This is talking about the nation that will sprout forth from him. She yigdal, he will grow up. V'yiyeh lahem milchamas im kol ha'amim, and they will fight with everybody. Meaning, the nature of Yishmael is to be at odds with everybody.
The ultimate colonizers.
Is Persians
Right.
that lineage from Ishmael or no?
Okay, so Persia is not descended from Ishmael,
Right.
but, and this the Maharal explains, they inherited the ideology of Ishmael. Meaning in the late 600s, Muhammad was not a Persian. He was not somebody from Persia or from the Levant. He was from Saudi Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, and he conquered the three major nations, the cultures that existed in the Middle East at that point in time, which is Byzantines, the Turks, the Persians, and the Egyptians, as well as pretty much everybody throughout the Levant. That's Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel.
But Persians are from the what's the lineage? Is it the
Persians were Babylonians before they were Persians.
so they were like Asa?
No. Parsi, meaning they descend from Bnei Yefes. Meaning Hashem from Bnei Yefes, they descend from Bnei Yefes. Yishmael comes from Bnei Shem.
So both Persians and Turks today, they're not from the lineage of Ishmael.
They are not from the lineage of Yishmael, but and this is important.
They adopted
the ideology. Meaning this is important, is that we're not talking about genealogy, we are talking about ideology. And this is the Rambam passes Halach L'Maisa with regards to Amalek. That Amalek is not a genealogy, Amalek is an ideology.
Oh, in today's day, when we talk about destruction of Amalek,
Correct.
Is the ideology.
It's an ideology, it's not a genealogy. Meaning otherwise, how do you say the Nazis were Amalek and Hamas was Amalek? No, they both adopt that ideology of the total annihilation, the destruction of the Jewish people. Meaning, and this is important, is that the ideologies are carried on from place to place, person to person, not necessarily genealogy. And it's important to point out that when we talk about Timcha Zecher Amalek, that means the memory of Amalek, that means the ideology, not you have to kill all of the Amalekites. I mean, Amalekite, most of the Rishonim hold, the Rambam passes this Halach L'Maisa, this is the Kesef Mishnah, that if an Amaleki surrenders, says, I don't want to fight the Jews, I don't hate the Jews, there's no chiv to kill them. In fact, it would be awesome.
If
Are they even around time anymore?
Yeah, no, then they're no longer.
Right.
No longer Amalek.
Just like the Para Adam.
Right. Meaning it's an ideology.
Right.
It's an ideology. What did you say?
So how did ideology survive if Shaul murdered all the
Left
them?
one
He
person.
didn't.
The king.
He didn't.
And
And that's the point, is that there were times in history, for most of history, that ideology was passed through genealogy. Because people lived in one place with one ideology. But at least since the Assyrians, since Sennacherib Melech Asshur, spreading everybody around the world, the ideologies have melded and intermingled and then reformed and reformulated and then gone to war against each other. And every couple of years or generations, there arises a group of people that has an ideology of the destruction of the Jewish people per se. That is their shita.
Is Hashem controls that?
Hashem controls everything.
So why create that?
That's a good question. We're not going to have time to discuss what the reason for the existence of Amalek is.
I get it. Sure, that ran.
It's a good question. Meaning, why does Amalek exist in the world? Bichlal? That's a good shot. Why does such a thing
Just
exist?
live anywhere. We would never be forced to live back in Israel.
So, by the way, it's not necessarily true that every enemy that we have is Amalek.
Well, we know today that we're fighting Ishmael as well.
Right, but I'm saying the Babylonians burned the first base of Mikdash, not Amalek. Right? When we conquered Eretz Yisrael the first time, there were 7 nations that we needed to conquer. None of them were Amalek. Amalek was like involved there somehow. They were camping out.
None of them even exist anymore.
What'd you say?
None of them even exist.
None of those 7 nations exist. Bichlal.
You're genocide.
But I mean, or they ran away, or they surrendered, or they didn't.
They probably got absorbed into Israel for the most part.
Some, yeah, and that's also shadow amongst the Rishonim.
They didn't have land at a certain point. At the time of Shlomo Melech,
Yeah,
like,
they were
didn't
done.
have land anymore,
Yeah.
but they probably lived among as non-Jews in Israel, and then by the second temple being destroyed, they were still non-Jews living in Israel,
Right.
So they were just kind of there.
So it took David HaMelech a long time to meaning from the days of Yeshua all the way until David HaMelech to get rid of the Plishtim, for example.
Right.
I
Meaning,
don't get that. Why? I know. What's his name? Yeshua. He had a clear instructions. Get rid of all of them, and he stopped at the Plishtim. He didn't go through.
he didn't finish everything. Yeah, he didn't finish the Yevusim either. David HaMelech had to conquer Yerushalayim from the Yevusim. Meaning, it wasn't finished. It was not finished. And the truth is that's a pasuk mefurish in Chumash. That lo tuchal chol esam maher pen tiber alach chayas haaretz. Is that you can't conquer them quickly because then it becomes uninhabited. So Eretz Yisrael's got to be inhabited, and you have to inhabit it with you. And if you don't inhabit it with you, then it's inhabited by other people. Which we pointed out in previous shurim that the number one chait of the Jewish people that led to October 7th was pulling out of Gush Katif, pulling out of Gaza. Yeah, it's Pasha, meaning.
Well, that's why Ariel Sharon was in coma for
So,
7 years.
that's the Cheshbon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's very clear. And I say this as in my most liberal sense of caring about everybody, and I mean this for real, is that the death of children in Gaza is the fault of Jews leaving Gaza. I mean, the best place to be a Palestinian child is in Israel. Right? If you are an Arab Israeli living in Tel Aviv,
You have more rights than any other Arab state.
you are doing better than anywhere else in the Middle East. And it's our fault. We pulled out of Gaza for some strange, weird conception that this would be good. And we left the poor Gazan children to the hands of mamzerim from Hamas. This all could have been very different. Meaning, if we would have had the koach, the
Wherewithal.
the faith in ourselves and in our process to say, no, not only are we not pulling out of Gaza, we are annexing Gaza.
That's what we're doing now.
Correct. And by the way, the war in Gaza will be finished the moment that Israel says, we are annexing this place. Then it's over. The moment that you say we're bringing in a bunch of yeshivas and a bunch of seminaries and a bunch of schools,
BRS East.
I'm saying, the moment that you say that, not that Trump is building Disneyland there,
Yeah.
but that we're building a new, it's going to be a beautiful new, coastal city, coastal enclave, and it's going to be gorgeous, and they'll fight against us, and anybody from that lives there that wants to live in peace and pay taxes to the state of Israel, you're more than welcome to stay. Those of you that don't, you can fight and die, or you can leave. Borders are open. Here's your ship. You and Greta, you can go back to Europe.
Are you concerned with Trump saying that it's like his land that he's going to annex?
Yeah, so we spoke about this a couple of months back when Trump said that. I think that it's a disaster.
It's a crazy thing.
It's a disaster on 2 levels. It's a disaster because giving a piece of Eretz Yisrael to any other nation is asr. It's asr. That's Aleph. And Beis is, even if it's a good idea politically and geopolitically in the days of Trump, Who says that it's going to be good for the state of Israel when AOC is the president?
Right. Let's talk about that. Wait, so what's technically considered Israel? 'Cause
Gaza. Gaza's included.
obviously Gaza, but I'm saying like Lebanon.
And South Lebanon. And the
Damascus.
the two areas that we've had the biggest trouble for the last 40 years have been the two areas of Eretz Yisrael that we didn't take over. That's Gaza and South Lebanon.
What about the traditionally Yehuda and Shomron that is very mixed?
Yeah,
So that we took over. But we have problems there because
Fully.
we haven't said it's ours. We haven't annexed it. We haven't said it belongs to us.
Northern Kingdom never took the north of Lebanon, south of Lebanon.
No, they did. But I'm saying,
Yeah. That
Oh,
was
you're talking about when
Since-
Israel was the.
but Damascus was part of Israel at one point.
yeah, all the way, yeah.
And during Shlomo,
Correct.
He had probably the most.
Yeah, I'm saying, but so there's debates on the Gemara exactly what the borders are. Given Shiram exactly where the borders are, but Lemaisa, when you consider for a moment that we said Yerushalayim belongs to us, v'zehu, and the world was like, no, it doesn't, blah 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 blah. Yerushalayim belongs to the Jewish people. That's it. Yerushalayim is a beautiful, wonderful, safe place to live. The Shtachim, Yehuda v'Shamron, like we're still like iffy about it, so it's still dangerous. And Gaza, where we Klal didn't say we're in charge of, became a cesspool of hatred, and South Lebanon, where we said we're not in charge of. And the moment that Israel says no, we're taking over this territory, and it's going to belong to us. Zewed, we're done with this.
It's like the opposite of what the world wants.
100%. Of course, it's the opposite of what the world wants. But every time that the state of Israel has done it, it's worked. And it's better for the people that live there, Jews and non-Jews.
It makes everyone safer,
It does.
especially in those areas, and also just it positions Israel better as a strong player in that.
Undoubtedly. Because again, and let's understand this, the war that we're fighting, at least in the Middle East, is we pere adam, milchamas im kol ha'amim. The Ibn Ezra explains, what does it mean? Yad b'kol v'yad kol bay. Yad b'kol, his hand is in everything. She'inatzach mitchila kol hagayim. That he will conquer everybody at first. He will be very, very successful in battle. Ve'achar kach yad kol bay. She'yinutzach b'sayf. And at the end, he'll be defeated. Meaning that Yishmael is going to have a meteoric rise and a cataclysmic fall. That's Ibn Ezra. V'al kol pnei kol echav, and in front of the face of all of his brothers, Yishkain, he will dwell. What does it mean? V'al pnei kol echav, on the face of all of his brothers. Who are his brothers? Who are his brothers? The brothers of Ishmael.
Yitzchak,
Yitzchak was his only brother.
That's brother. Who's his brothers?
Esau.
No, it's his son-in-law and nephew. Avram had another wife. Her name was Keturah.
But Keturah was
Correct.
Hagar also.
Correct.
So
Means-
he had other children.
Lots of other kids. Va'al penei kol echav shem b'nei Keturah. Says the Ibn Ezra, Yishkain, he will dwell she'igdal zaret mehem, that Yishmael's children will outnumber those of Keturah. Meaning that he'll have a relationship with them. There'll be this relationship between Bnei Yishmael and Bnei Keturah, and Yishmael will become the greatest of them. Now, we're not entirely sure who Bnei Keturah is, but that seems to be the Far East. And there's a relationship that is between the countries of Ishmael and the countries of the Far East.
You're talking about China?
China, North Korea, Japan. I'm saying, those are the, seems to be questionable, and don't know. But those are the places that Chazal say that Avram sent off Bnei Keturah with the pasuk says with Matanas, and Chazal say on that with kshafim, with kishuf, with all sorts of magic and witchcraft and pantheism and polytheism. Meaning those are the countries that monotheism never got to. Right. So you have a world that is currently divided between right now. This is amazing to point out. More or less what we have is a is a world that is divided up ideologically between the ideological descendants of Esav, the ideological descendants of Ishmael, and the ideological descendants of Keturah. That's why the world is more or less spread out. Yeah.
Who's China?
It's Bnei Keturah, Lich'ara. Lich'ara, those are Bnei Keturah.
Russia's Mongol,
Right,
right?
maybe. Russia's very big. It's hard to figure it out. Say what?
Some of Russia is the Far East.
100%. I'm saying some of Russia's Kimat Europe and some of Russia's Kimat
Russia's
China.
still the empire that they built. It still maintains that structure.
Maybe. I mean, the USSR is done.
No, but I'm talking about the what's it called? Gosh, who's the fighters? I forget the name. The MMA fighters.
Yeah.
So they're all different type of.
So there's a Zohar that we learned on Shabbos. I don't want to just chaz the Zohar at the end of Parshas Vayera. It says the Zohar Kadosh. Says v'zimnim b'nei Yishmael lemishlat ba'ara kadisha kad ihi reikana mikolas kad ihi reikanis. In the future, Yishmael is going to rule over Eretz Yisrael when it is empty of all things, meaning when it's barren. Yishmael will be in charge of Eretz Yisrael when nothing grows there. 500 years of the Ottoman Empire, right? They ruled over Eretz Yisrael. Nothing grew there. It was barren, it was desolate, nothing was there. And that is, says the Zohar, because they had a bris milah that was empty of meaning. Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Balei Bris, people that have a bris, and Yishmael has a bris, but his bris was empty. So they ruled over Eretz Yisrael at a time when it's empty. Michal Zman Sagi, for a long time. And it's going to be empty just like them. And they are going to hold back the Jewish people from settling in their land until the end of the schus, the end of the merit of the sons of Ishmael, meaning they get paid off for their bris. They will have control of Eretz Yisrael until their schus is finished. Once it's finished, it's done. It's over. V'zimnin ba Yishmael lis'ara kravint kifin ba'alma, and in the future, l'chara, once that period of time is finished, where they no longer control Eretz Yisrael, they are going to make big wars in the world. Lis'ara kravint kifin ba'alma. And Bnei Edom are going to rise up upon them, meaning there's going to be a war from Bnei Edom to Bnei Yishmael. That's going to be the war. And they are going to have a wage war on them. 3 spheres. Chad al Yam. One is going to be on the sea. V'chad al Yabashta. And one on dry land, v'chad samech l'Yerushalayim, and one close to Yerushalayim. Meaning 3 different battlefields: land, sea, and close to Yerushalayim. V'yishaltun olin be'olin ve'ara kadisha lo yitmaser lebnei Edom. And they will tussle, ruling one over the other. Ve'ara kadisha, but the Holy Land will not be given to Bnei Edom. Meaning, Bnei Edom is not going to take hold of Eretz Yisrael. Bahau Zimna, at this point in time, Yis'ar Amma Chad Misaifa Alma, Al Rei Chaifa. There will be a nation from the end of the world that will attack Romi Chaifa, the descendants of Edom who are Chayv, meaning those the wicked descendants of Edom. There's going to be a war between Esav and Ishmael, and then there's going to be a third character that shows up from the other side of the world. V'yigach ba krova telas yarchim, and they will engage in battle for 3 months. V'yizkanshun tama amamaya, v'yiplun bi'adayhu, and they will gang up against Edom, and they will fall in their hands. Adi is kanshun kol bnei Edom Allah mikol seife alma, until all of the bnei Edom from all around the world will gather together and wage war against them. Chedin yis, and then they'll win. Chedin yisar kutsh brichu alayu havahu dichsiv ki zevach Hashem la'Hashem bebatsha. And finally, when they win, there will be a victory, and this will be the zevach la'Hashem, the slaughtering that Hashem will do in Batsha, wherever Batsha is. That's in Eretz Edom. Now, Eretz Edom is an interesting place today. Where is Edom?
Europe, America.
No, the location of Eretz Edom from the days of Tanakh.
Oh, that's like right outside of Israel.
Yeah, that's Jordan, right? It's a place that used to be Edom and is now Yishmael. Zevach le'bevatsha, that there will be, Hashem will be taking retribution from Batsha. Lebasar da machsiv, and then what does the pasuk say? It's pasuk in Iyov. Le'achos b'kanfos haaretz v'yinaru rishayim mimena. That Hashem will hold on to the 4 corners of the world and shake off the rishayim from it.
Isn't this part of the Zemiros on Shabbos?
Yeah.
Baruch Hallel,
Yeah,
the second part
yes.
by,
We reference B'vay Me'edem Chametz Begadim. It's it's all talking about this. It's Gemara's Makkas and a few other places. V'yashitzi livnei Edem mina v'yivaser kol chilin de le'ila v'lo yishtar chila le'ila al amma de alma ela chila de yisrael b'lechudai. And at that point in time, the only army that will be left will be the Jewish army. Meaning, the only fighting power that will be left in the world will be Klal Yisrael. Everything else will be exhausted. Hava d'chsiv, Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Hashem is the shadow by your right hand. Begin dishma kitche be'yimina ve'oraisa be'yimina ve'al da be'yimina talia tali kala ve'tanin debai lezak ve'yimina al smela kama da'akmud d'chsiv miminai eish das lamai וזמנה דעשי הישיע ימינך וענני, והאו זמנה כסיב כי אז הפך אל עמים סוף הברורה לקרוא כולם בשם השם לבדשכם אחד, וכסיב ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמי אחד ברוך השם לעולם אמן ואמן. Meaning at that point in time there will be a recognition and understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem's right hand will be revealed. And that will be Bayom Hahu Yeh Hashem Echad Shema Echad. That's the end of the story. Meaning that's the final chapter.
So when the Bnei Edom loses the fight with Ishmael, is that the Crusade War when they were fighting over Jerusalem? Is that the time period?
I don't know. Yishmael seems to be a Chai V'Kayim today.
Well, they took control, right? But they're getting weaker and weaker. At least
Right, but I'm saying this hasn't happened yet.
Is this Gog and Magog? What's this?
The Zohar doesn't call this Gog and Magog. The Zohar doesn't refer to this as Gog and Magog. But it makes sense to say that this is at least a stage of the Milchamas of Gog and Magog. But what I want to point out, and this is important to understand, is that Gog and Magog isn't necessarily a particular person or a particular war. And you know this from the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make Chizkiyahu Mashiach, and the Assyrians, Sancherib Melech Ashur, Gog and Magog. Means that Gog and Magog is not a person and a place. It is an archetype of a person and a place. And that archetype is
continuous wars.
And it happens in series, meaning the wars of Gog and Magog.
It's fluid.
They're malleable, they change. There are different characters that become Gog from Magog, and whenever that exists, there is also a potential of Mashiach at the same time.
Doesn't this happen every generation?
Right, meaning that there is the potential of Gog and Magog and the potential for Mashiach.
I heard someone say like he thinks that World War II, Hitler from Germany is Gog and Magog because of a few different things.
Yeah, okay, but the point is that maybe it was, but it certainly wasn't the end of it. And what I want to explain here, this is very important to understand, is that when Chazal are telling us, and there are many, many pieces in Chazal, and even in the Nevi'im, that are not clear and that are contradictory. And the Gemara Sanhedrin already points out that the Nevuos of Yechezkel and the Nevuos of Zechariah seem to be at odds with each other. The Gemara says, no, it depends. Sometimes, if you have certain zechuyos, then it'll be achishem, and it'll be quick. And if not, then it'll be be'ita, it'll be at its time, meaning it'll be a slower process. And we pointed out a couple of weeks ago that the Zohar Kodesh tells us that whether it's quick or slow, it is in stages. It's going to roll out in multiple stages. That there are, time after time after time, that we're going to deal with different awakenings and reawakenings. And the point, and this is the point that we started with, is that as nations fight with each other, it reveals HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. And every new revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world is a new way of looking at things. It's a brand new way of looking at things. And then Sivas writes that this is pshat in a fanciful Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra, in the stories of Rabbi Bar Chana, put that over there. The Gemara of Rabbi Bar Chana. So the Gemara tells the story. So Ein Gimel and Beis. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, on the stories of Rabbi Bar Chana, Zimna Chada Hava Ka'azlin B'Svinta. Once we were traveling by boat. V'chazinen ho kavro kvara. D'yasva le chalsa agabe v'kadach agma ilave. And we saw a certain fish which had sand, big fish with sand on top of it, and grass growing on it, meaning it had been there for a long time. Savrinin yaveshtahi, we thought that it was dry land. Salkenen ve'afenanu v'ashlinen agabe. And we got out of the boat, and we started cooking and baking, meaning we set up camp at the back of this fish. V'kadcham gabe is hapich, and as it got hot, the fish flipped over. V'ilav dahavim mekavra svinta, and if not for the fact that we were close to the boat, havatavina, we would have drowned. Says the Nesivos that what Rabbi Bar Chana is telling us here, this fascinating festival. I mean, there's 1,000 from Mahalchim in this, but the Nesivos HaMishpat, primary commentary on Shulchan Aruch, Nesivos writes that this is the story of Klal Yisrael in Galus at the point in time that we realize that this is all wrong. Meaning the place that you thought was dry land and an oasis in the middle of the sea was just a big fish. And as it gets a little hotter, as you settle in there more, it flips. And that's not just the story of Klal Yisrael and Galus. The biggest story here is not that it got hot and flipped over. It's that we thought it was dry land and it wasn't. Ki'ilu. And this is the root of all conspiracy theories, is everything that you think to be true is not. I'm going to tell you a secret. All the conspiracy theories are wrong. They're not MS. But that there is an enormous conspiracy theory is for sure true. Meaning the conspiracy theory is that we all think that this is the way that the world is supposed to be, and it's not. It's mamish not. The world is not supposed to be like this. The world is supposed to be very different. Everything is supposed to be very different. And something amazing happened 10 days ago. And that's what everybody in the left in America is freaking out about, and they're 100% right, is that Israel is dragging the US into a war. It's true. For the first time in over 2,000 years, the Jewish people are leading the way in battle. For the first time, we are directing humanity. We're pulling the strings for the very first time. Meaning all the things that they've said about us for many, many, many years. That the Jews control the weather, and the Jews control the economy, and the Jews control the market, and the Jews control Hollywood. None of that was true. This one's true. It's absolutely true. And it's supposed to be true. And the shayla is, are we ready for that? Are we ready to take that step? Because that's what the Zohar Kodesh means. Is that at some point in time, all the other armies are going to be exhausted. The only one that's going to be meaningful at all is Klal Yisrael. That doesn't mean that nobody else is going to have a gun. It means that the army that, right now, the army that dictates the way that the world works is called America. For the last 100 years, certainly since the end of the Cold War. It was the end of the war between superpowers, and America's been the only superpower, really, that the world has had. And Yishmael's very angry about that. They also want to be a superpower. And they have not been matzlech. They're fighting with everybody. That's the zone, right? They're fighting with everybody because they want to be a superpower. And there's somebody in Misaifa Olam that is trying to be a superpower as well, and they're going to attack America. There's a war that's happening. And by the end of it, Klal Yisrael is going to be the only superpower left. What does it mean that you're a superpower? It means that the world asks you permission. And if they're going to cross any lines, it's crossing your lines. That's what's going on here. That's what the Zohar Kodesh is speaking about. Now, how much does this hurt us? How much does this affect us? There's a billion things to talk about here. But it's kedai to point out that I won't quote this. There's a few makaros to speak about, but we'll probably. Marim Zidichov writes, Shama B'Shem HaKadosh Elimelech of Lezhansk, B'zeh HaLashon. Quotes from Rav Melech of Lezhansk, third generation of Hasidus from the Baal Shem, the Magid, to Rav Melech. Hagam asher kamu psukim asher b'shas bias Mashiach yeh milchamas gedolos milchamas Gog and Magog. It's true. It's brought down many psukim. Before Mashiach comes, when Mashiach comes, that there's going to be big wars. There'll be Gog and Magog. Oimnam hu hifil b'tfilasei shelo yiyu as milchamas. Said Rav Melech that he figured out. He davened through his tefillas that those wars that were said by the Nevi'im, like we were saying before, those terrible things that the Nevi'im predicted aren't going to happen. That Reb Melech managed to pull off that it's not going to happen. You have like this from Reb Mendel of Rimenov, who writes this in his parish on the Akdama to the Maharal in Gvur Hashem, that we're not going to suffer the wars of Gog and Magog. We're not going to need to suffer them. Because we've already, he says differently, he says because we've already paid plenty through.
Who says that?
Reb Mendel of Rimenov. So we've already paid off throughout, and Reb Tzadok kind of Lublin quotes this, that we've already, I think, David said it.
Similar concept to the years of Mitzrayim.
Right, meaning we paid off. Yeah, we've already paid it off. He says, so what's the milchama going to be? Zurak hameich kemach yamid be'amidu ve'yimkar kemach va'ameichas schera al malbush yamid im ha'am ve'yimder schera pitam yavay al yavi vaser ve'yomer asher Mashiach ba. He says those wars, instead of being fought militaristically, could be fought economically. So Reb Melech says, it could be fought economically. They don't need to be fought militaristically. Zkein shamati mibi adeni av zkeini shalom Hashem HaKadosh Elimelech HaKadosh Hashem v'chein muva b'sev tol the Sodom. Meaning, This is important to understand, is that those milchamos that the Nevi'im spoke about could exist on multiple levels, and we've spoken this in many, many, many places. You can have the war. And what's the purpose of a war? It's for somebody to win and somebody to lose, meaning to figure out who's in charge here. Which value system, which economy, which way of living is going to be the one that wins. And overwhelmingly what you find in our dar is that this is not being fought militaristically. It's being fought economically. The key movers and shakers are not, meaning the weapons back up the economy, not the other way around. By the end of the Cold War, the milchama was about money. Capitalism and socialism and communism all kind of amalgamate. I mean, yes, it's still there, it's still true. But if you think about what the milchama is today, what do they refer to the West as? The free world, right? What does it mean about the rest? Not free world. What does that mean? That they don't have freedom. Meaning,
Freedom of choice.
no human rights, right? No human rights.
Democracy.
No democracy. It is a fascinating thing to consider that what you're talking about is a milchama between people that believe in human rights and personal liberties, and that's called the West, versus people that believe in state control. That's the milchama that's going on. Right? There is only one country that believes in both of those values, and that's Israel. Meaning Israel is the only democracy that is overwhelmingly religious. There's no other democracy that's religious.
Not religious enough.
It'll get more, and it's getting more. Laat Israel is becoming more religious.
Just look at Netanyahu.
Right?
Going to the Kotel.
And that's what I'm saying.
It's mind-boggling.
Talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
There isn't a religious world doesn't believe in a true democracy. The rules supposed to be by the laws and everything should be led by Sanhedrin, right?
Yeah, but that means that you have personal liberties. I mean, Klal Yisrael, the Torah Kadosh is the only system that believes in a government that has freedom that is religious. It's a paradox that exists. And I want to make this very clear here, and this is very kedai to understand, that the machlokas that's going on today between the world that believes that the world should live in accordance with religious values or national values versus the world of personal liberty, that's the clash that's going on at the moment. Yishmael is fighting with everyone. And everybody's fighting with him. Because there's a clash between national identity and personal liberty. That's what's going on in the world. And this war is being fought, number one, primarily, and this is Rav Melech, economically. That's the number one way that it's being fought. And for the very first time in the last week and a half, Klal Yisrael was the mover and shaker in this war. For the very first time. Mamish for the first time. That Iran said, we don't have a nuclear, we know that they're lying, but I mean, they weren't saying we're gonna bomb you. They weren't saying that. And Klal Yisrael was like, no, we're not gonna live with that threat in the future. We're gonna take care of it now. We have pulled the world into this. And you see, everybody's already talking ceasefire. Right? I mean, whether it is or isn't is a shaila right now. Why? Because we'd rather play this out economically than militaristically. Who decides that? Who decides how this war gets played right now?
Primarily Israel.
Israel. We decide. For the first time since the Churban HaBayis, we decide what's happening next. And that's a big deal. We are actually pulling the strings of history right now. We are not being schlepped along in history. We're pulling the strings of history. And I want to make this point very clear, is that the more that we have the capacity to bring together the world of personal liberty and religious fealty, meaning to believe kol kula in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and in His Torah, and understand that that doesn't infringe on the rights of any person at all. It enhances life. It doesn't diminish it. It enhances freedom. It doesn't take away from freedom. Like Chazal tell us, "Ein lecha ben chayr ela mi she'oseh b'Torah." The freest you can be is being engaged in Torah. That's the root of all personal freedom. It is the antithesis of Islam, which is submission. And it's the antithesis of the West, which is burn it down. For the very first time since the Churban HaBayis, we are calling the shots of how this war plays out. And the more that we are oskim b'Torah for real and using Torah to experience the greatest sense of personal freedom, the more that that milchama is resolved without bullets having to be fired. That's the avodah. Is the more that we do this, this is, and you say this every single time you finish your Shemana Esrei or finish your Kaddish. Oiseh shalom b'mroimav. Baruch Hu makes shalom up there. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. You should make peace down here. Means that the more that we can put together contradictory, paradoxical ideas and live with that and demonstrate it and educate it, because Baruch Hu is making shalom b'mroimav, that makes shalom down here. So who's piled that there be shalom b'mroimav? Us. We make shalom between these contradictory ideas. And the more that we make shalom, the more that there is. That's Talmidei Chachamim Arvim Shalom Ba'olam. The more that Talmidei Chachamim are engaged in learning, so that brings out the fact that Torah gives cherus to the world. All personal liberties that exist ultimately are rooted in Torah. All personal liberties. Rabbi Sachs has some great books about this. What the Torah gave to the world is the idea of personal freedom. Everybody was saying, burn your firstborn son to God. And the Torah's like, no, love your children. Men have to dominate. No, you should love your wife. You should respect her. V'ahavta l'recha kamecha. What Klal Yisrael the capacity to do, and this is what it means. And Klal Yisrael are in Eretz Yisrael, as we are now, as a nation, we have the capacity to change the way that the world fights. And that's the avodah right now. And the more that we see us in Chutz La'aretz, see ourselves as emissaries of that mission, to live in a world of total adherence of Torah and mitzvahs, without it infringing at all on our personal liberties, the more that that Kiddush Hashem inspires the rest of humanity. I want to make this point very clearly, that the reason that the United States of America is so clearly Baruch Hashem right now on the side of Israel is because Baruch Hashem, there is a Kiddush Hashem being done by Jews in America that are oskim Torah, that are totally devoted to Torah and mitzvahs, and also to freedoms and liberty. And that's mashpia. That has an influence. That has an influence on the people that are around us in an amazing way. This is the Kiddush Hashem that Jews of America are supposed to be doing. And Lu Yitzur, we would have been successful in doing all of these things in every place that we had been. Things might have been different earlier. And the Sforno makes this point in Parshas Vayetze, is that either we will figure out how to do this from Eretz Yisrael, or we will need to figure out how to do this everywhere else. And if we fail to introduce the values of Torah and Mitzvahs, of Avas Hashem, of Yir Shamayim, of V'ahavta L'orecha Kamaycha, if we fail to do that, so then that nation that we are in turns against us. They chase us out and we fail there. And then that nation collapses. The last thing that any empire does is kick out its Jews. Historically, the last act of any failing state is getting rid of its Jews. That's the end. The end. Mamish, you look throughout history. Shem Shmuel writes that the last thing that the Greeks did was fall to the Hashmonaim. And then they were done. Then Rome took over. The last thing that Hitler Yimach Shemo did was kick out, was murder Jews. And then Germany was done. Nazism was done. So it goes everywhere. The end of the Spanish Empire was the expulsion. That's it. Kacha.
This sounds like a story of the fish.
That's it. Flips over. And then we jump back in the boat. And as in that boat is the boat of Torah that we take it to another place, and we've had fish after fish after fish after fish, conception after conception after conception, and ultimately all of those fish end up dying, right? And they're all dead. And there's a lot more to speak about that. That's the milchama between the Leviathan and the Sharabar, which we've spoken about in previous shiurim, which is also Esav and Yishmael. But those two ideologies that are currently clashing against each other, we're the ones that are supposed to make shalom. And the more that we make shalom, the less that has to be fought with guns. So does it affect us?
Yeah.
We affect it. That's the point. We affect it. And the more that we are working on affecting it, the less that it's going to affect us. So we've got our work cut out for the summer. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach to be continued.